We can have. Planned it so that I wouldn't have to come to meetings.
I know, exactly. Yeah.
So did you head home? South Carolina?
I was here, but
What, parents?
my mom lives in Kentucky.
Oh.
And I own some property in North Carolina.
Even.
We did. It's actually pretty nice. It's like 78.
All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing started. So we can get a nice break between this and the regular meeting. So I call this work session to order. All right. Cindy, I think this is in your court then.
Everybody, thanks for being here. I have a presentation on the development. Just feel free to stop me with questions as we go along. I think that'll be a little bit easier to handle the questions as they come up instead of waiting.
Okay.
All right.
Good grief. Go ahead, Cindy. Jeez.
Let's begin with some an overview of how budgeting. Budgeting for municipalities is a little bit different than it is for persons or for corporations. But nonetheless, we still deal with revenue. And when I project revenue, I'm looking at historical numbers. I can look back to 2011. Plus then I take into account economic factors that I have gotten from the state, from the county, and from other different organizations like Fuller Trust and those. Then we go fixed costs, other costs that we pay no matter what we do here. If we didn't do a thing, we'd still have to pay fixed costs. And I base those also on historical data and economic factors that I obtained. And then I also contact like DMA, Black Hills, and our utility companies to determine what their intentions are for 2023 as far as rate. Then I look at personnel costs. Now I'll get into that in a little bit. And the
Hey, John.
last thing that we do is we look at the projects or goals, and
We're doing this via Zoom.
then we,
You're doing this via
if
Zoom?
they fit, yay. If they don't, then we have to look for other sources of revenue like grants or tapping into our reserves. Any questions about that?
Sounds solid.
So tonight, what we're gonna work on is goal, which is getting a good overview of what projects and what staffing levels. One, we're gonna talk about what the department heads have requested, and then we're going to talk about what you all think of those requests. So that I can start narrowing down the field so that I can, by the 1st of October, create a draft budget for you all to review. So, under projects, administration needs funds for master plan, modification of municipal code, completion of the GIS mapping, and whether you want to continue with the sign project that we, as they've talked about in the last few meetings, teamed up with the creative district to partner with them for the sign project. Any questions, comments, or any additions to those?
So a couple things. So the master plan, we do have some money that we've been hanging on to hire a contractor. I feel like it's about $55,000, something around that, 57,000.
70,000.
I'm sorry, 70,000. So with that being the case, we so that's 70,000 less than we need to set aside in 2023.
You still have,
The master.
so that works different
Okay.
in municipal budgeting. It doesn't, you have to re-budget it in the 23 year if you're gonna do it in the 23 year.
Okay.
It's not a carryover.
So, and if I may,
You're gonna re-budget.
yeah. So in some ways, I would almost put that in the fixed costs. Because it's not, we don't need to pull money out of, so let me just back up. So Cindy and I had a conversation that from my perspective, what makes sense to me is if I know what our revenue is, estimated, of course, what our fixed costs are, things we have to pay in 2023, subtracted from revenue, then we have a value that's left over that we can choose to do projects, staffing, et cetera. So in this case, would that 70,000 be part of fixed costs? And then we,
Fixed costs are only costs that are gonna happen no matter what. This is something that you're gonna budget with the excess money.
so it's not, it's excess to the extent that we haven't spent it yet.
Correct.
Is there a way to asterisk next to things that we actually have the money for that are in the excess? Because I'm concerned about understanding how much money we already have in grants that we already have, that we don't have to find more money to augment. Does that make sense? Because we've got the ARPA grant of 300 and something. So we know, so it's almost like we need a fourth category. This is money that we have in hand. We have not spent it in 2022. It is in existence in 2023, and we have 70,000 to put to the master plan, which could cover the master plan. We don't need to budget more. We have whatever 356,000 in the ARPA funds that we probably, that is not money that takes away from the excess. Does that make sense? Because
It's added to the excess.
right, but in that case, it's money we have in hand. And we just have to decide how to spend it, but it's not gonna remove, it's not gonna give us 356,000 less to play with in excess. That makes sense. So I think it's really important that we understand what money we have in hand that's gonna be brought forward into 2023 that we have available easily to, what's the word when you decide how to spend it? There's a word for that. Well, yeah, it was another word.
Appropriate the funds.
Yeah, that we know we have and can appropriate to that purpose, what it might be. Because my concern is we have a lot of wants and a lot of things we need to get done. And I'm gonna have a hard time understanding what we can get done if I don't know how much money is actually money that's not already encumbered. That's the word I wanted. That's not already encumbered. Does that make sense to you all?
I think, well, let me,
The way we do the budget, actually, you can find that out.
Right.
Looking at the sheets that's provided.
And-
Because essentially you have, here's what the projects are, here's what the costs are, and that's why we're going through this right now.
Right.
So we're going through this right now in order to determine, does that make sense? Do we want to continue with the master plan? Do we want to continue with codification? Do we want to continue with GIS, we want to continue signage. If we say yes, then that will be put in and we'll see if we have enough money to be able to. do
Right.
that.
But my point is, if there's already $70,000 that we have encumbered this year
Yeah.
for the master plan,
Right.
I guess the decision is, if we don't want to do the master plan, that 70,000 becomes available for something else.
Not really.
No, it's
Yeah.
not like it's in the savings account
No,
at this
it's not
point.
in the
It's
savings
just funds that have not been spent.
Okay,
Which is
Yes, we have to
different.
start over and say, are we gonna do 70,000 again next year?
okay,
Yeah.
Right.
all right,
Does that
thank
make
you.
sense?
Right.
Yes,
Okay, good.
That is what I was trying to say.
thank you. It's the laborers. Okay, so then can I ask then, under administration, without knowing any ballpark as to what this might cost, I don't have any idea whether I think it's, you know, if codification is $5,000, that seems something reasonable to plan to do, but if it's $50,000, that becomes another thing. So is it possible to over time get ballpark numbers to go with these?
Yes,
Okay.
we will be getting ballpark.
Okay,
We are still in the process. That's why some of these have numbers to them and some of them don't, because we're still in the process
okay,
of getting them. Because it can't go in the budget until I have a number.
okay, but you feel confident you can get these numbers, you just need more time?
Yeah.
The information can be gleaned, okay, thank you.
So great. So just so I'm clear, what we're doing today is just hearing ideas from staff
I'm
regarding.
sorry, you're gonna have to start over. I was not prepared to listen. Let's start over.
Sure. So just so I'm clear, what we're doing today is hearing ideas from staff as to what projects you would like to see completed, and then we'll get more detail, actual costs and what the projects actually are in the future, or
Met with the staff. I have met with the committees that arranged to meet with you. And I have come up with a list of potential projects that we want, that are needs and wants that we need you to determine whether you're comfortable with that being added to the budget or not.
I have an idea.
Yeah,
Because one of the things I liked about the process, I think it was trustee Weber said quite a while ago, if you're on a committee, make sure you meet with the staff and look over the budget before our budget hearing starts, so and we did that for both parks and law enforcement. And so we've looked at those two sections and determined what our priorities are. What's coming to you, those two sections is staff and committee saying this is what our priorities are. So it would be helpful to start with those two. Rick and I can talk on those, and that might help inform the way we do the rest of it, because because some of it, if it's staff only, then we kind of get into a deeper hole about whether we agree with that. Administration is a good example of that. Committee that really covers administration per se.
but this is also just an overview. We're
Yeah,
not
yes.
getting into the weeds at this point.
that's kind of my question is,
Yeah.
our role today here
Yeah.
is simply to listen, right?
No, it's actually.
We have some
guidance. Yeah, we're giving some guidance.
Okay,
So part of what, for instance, you might say, well, I think that codification is, but we should put that down on the priority list. But boy, that master plan's number one. And GIS, I know for our utility people, that's number. So we could be helpful by saying what the priorities are.
okay. Well, if that's the case, then I would like to. Basically, I don't feel comfortable making that type of decision without a little bit more information as far as, because what we have right in front of us is a title of a project.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah.
So we don't know what it might cost, what the project entails, how long it will take, if we have to hire somebody, like none of the details are here.
Not setting it in stone, this is.
Right.
we're limited.
So if I'm to speak for or against, or say, okay, yeah, like, well, I don't think we should do the codification of the municipal code, for example. How would I be informed enough to make that decision at this point?
Right, exactly. Exactly. And I don't think any decision we make currently today is set in stone. I think if we go through this, looking at, here's the big picture, here are the projects that we have been talking about. And then as we go into each of these different things, then we dive deeper into it and say, okay, So what is the parks project? What is included in this? How much money do we think it's gonna cost? That kind of thing. But I don't think that's the discussion.
Basically, I don't feel prepared enough at this point to have this discussion.
Yeah, I would agree.
So
Yeah,
can
we'll see
we
an overview.
do it tomorrow or later? I mean, I don't know. That was kind of the question, what we're up to tonight. It sounds like maybe we'll just hear details about this, or I don't know.
I'm comfortable with continuing simply based on we've already heard of some of these projects, so I think it's worth talking some more about them. Of course, we can't make any decisions in the absence of knowing money, but if somebody isn't familiar with the project that's being proposed, I think this is the time to get it described.
Yes.
So we are all on the same page, is how I looked at it tonight. If that's helpful.
But yeah, that would be great.
I'm good with that.
Okay. Then let's carry on. Do you have anything that you want more information on right now?
Yeah, if we're gonna, the master plan project, application municipal code, and complete GIS mapping and signage project, I feel like the master plan is somewhat nebulous. We have a dollar amount and that's about it. As far as I know regarding the state of that whole project. I think that having a different administrator might affect that process. So I don't know what sort of detail we're hoping to come up with as far as planning or budgeting for that. I don't know what the codification of municipal code entails. I don't know where we are with the GIS mapping, what is lacking. I know a lot of what we have, but I don't know what else is incomplete. And we don't have any numbers on the signage project or information beyond the sketch that we were given 2 weeks ago, I guess. So I don't know how we can make decisions about this stuff.
Okay. Yeah, great.
So I'll start with administration. First topic is master plan. So the master plan had a few community meetings that were well attended and good information came out of. From those meetings and review of the master plan at the board level and at the planning commission, at I believe 3 planning commission meetings. Ultimately, what we really gleaned from that was that there's not a lot of substantive changes that need to happen from the original master plan. Most people still are in line with what the goals and growth for the town would be from the late 90s to today. There's just some cleanup and additions that needed to be made. So at that time, the conversation had been had about whether or not to hire a firm and to do that that updated master plan. I took the original master plan and all the data that was received from the community sessions, which is as far as the update had gotten with the previous administrator and intern that was working on that at the time, and provided those to a firm that does master planning and different types of plans, just to get an idea of what an estimate would be to do an update. They ballparked that it would be $50,000 to $75,000 to do the update.
Please continue.
And from that, we brought that to the board and I let the board know that information. In the meantime, we took it back to planning commission, gave them the information of what it's going to cost, asked the planning commission if they felt they were capable to take on the update themselves or if they wanted to do it through a firm. They stated they wanted to do it through a firm. At that time, there was a turnover on the planning commission. So we took it back to the planning commission with the new members and said, this is where we're at with the master plan update. What would you like to do? And we had planning commission members who said, let's look at it ourselves and see what we can. And it has been scheduled on an agenda for planning commission that didn't have a quorum. So it didn't go forward. It was scheduled at another planning commission meeting and the planning commission didn't want to discuss it without the entire commission present. So it's been scheduled again for September 6th. Thank you. I can remember what was the 6th of the 8th at 4 p.m. Where again, the master plan information will come up. Where I respectfully disagree is what difference it makes if we move forward with the firm based on the
administrator because it's still the plan for the town based on the direction and information from the town. And whether we started hiring the firm that was going to do the master plan update now in 2022 or tabled it and the new administrator started looking to hire the firm in 2023, I don't think makes that much of a difference. That's where we were at with the master plan update. As far as codification of municipal code, as we've seen repeatedly over the last few years, there are major areas in the code that need updated. There are areas of the code that are outdated based on statute changes. And so every time we send in a new ordinance, they publish that ordinance and then we pay for an update and they send us just pages that go in our municipal book to replace other pages. But an actual codification of the municipal code is a complete review of the entire document, page 1 to page done, with all of those updates being made, typo corrections, grammatical, moving things around, making sure that it's completely up to date with all ordinance changes and state law changes that have happened. So that's what we're talking about there. They are changing the way that Muni Code bills for those codification updates. It used to be by page, by word, by image, and they are revamping that. So I do expect to have an idea of what it will cost the size of our codified code shortly, but I don't have that yet. GIS mapping, this is just continuing to build on that. We still would like to have mapped the main water lines for the water companies. It's adding lines. We have points on our GIS map, but we don't have where our actual raw water lines are, where they run, where they turn, all of those types of things we would like to get added. Eventually, it'll never be complete, but we want to continue to build on the mapping system as we have the ability to add more data and pinpoint more locations. That also includes the levels, the extra layers we've been building on adding, such as our sidewalks that have been repaired and put in since 2014, because the sidewalk fee sunsets in 2024. So if the board is going to want to continue that, it's going to need to go back before the voters in 2023. High priority project administratively would we get it on the map so people can see what has been done with that money over the last 10 years. Signage project, we just know it's a topic. We don't have a lot of data yet as far as the Paonia Creative District on what they would like to plan for 2023. We just know it's out there. So we wanted to keep it in the forefront in front of everybody's mind.
Okay, thanks. So what I heard was the master plan is in planning commission. The codification of municipal code is a complete overhaul of our entire code language, and pricing is to be determined as it's being changed right now. GIS mapping, additional layers would be sidewalks. Is that the only one?
It's just one off the top, but no, it'd be the raw water lines, other lines.
Okay. And signage projects, basically, we don't have much information beyond what we're doing. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I just had a question on the GIS. So right now, are all the meters to the water companies, are they in the GIS map?
Yes.
Okay, there, thank you.
Do we have the capability of doing some of that by ourselves?
Yes.
Okay. We have
And training's happening. Yes.
So staff can do the inputs and updates and not have to send it to an engineering firm.
That's right. We have staff that's learning how to do that. There may be engineering costs while they initially do that because we don't want them to dramatically mess it up, but they are gleaning those capabilities.
So that's important because as they repair a PRV, or they repair, they put in a new sewer line or things like that, as those repairs happen, that's how you stay on top of it.
Right.
Right.
Sending it to an engineering firm just gets lost in the shuffle.
It's just like looking at our trees. We've taken out trees and planted new trees. I don't want to pay an engineer to put those trees on the map.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Yeah. So is that SGM that's doing the GIS mapping exclusively?
That is who we're contracted.
SGM. And the signage project, is that all the Creative Coalition, or is it gonna cost the town? We don't know yet.
The town typically has some buy-in to it as well as we move through the process, but we don't know what that would be yet. So is there anything on here that you want to add that has not been considered yet for administration? Okay, let's move on to building.
Should we do capital and administration at the same time while we're at it?
No.
Okay.
So, under building, we have, plans to merge with City of Delta. Well, I hope that'll be done this year. So that could be done this year, and so, does anybody have anything else that they want to add to building?
You were referring to the building inspector. That will be.
This merge with City of Delta would be the actual inspection. It's not on there, but something that we may want to consider is what I'll find out from with City of Delta, what kind of, if they're using a software or I believe they use a data software that they use to help with their plans. And there's been no discussion about whether there would be a payment into that or if that's included in the structure. So I'll confirm that, but that may be something that we would want.
Anything else that you can think of that you want to add to building?
This is down the road quite a ways, but right now we're in the process of approving 2018 and the building code gets updated every 3 years. So there's a 2021 update already here. I think best practices every 6 years, you look at the code. So like in 2024, there'll be another one. So 2025, we should do back, whoever's still on the council needs to look back. Say to readopt. But we've now brought ourselves to 2018, but you don't want to like we got ourselves in a bind here. We adopted 2018 and what was it, Christina, 2004 was our last one? I think something like that. It was way back. Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, it's great. Thank you.
Right. Don't procrastinate. It's the motto, right?
Don't kick your can down.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next thing is public safety. So I'm gonna let, I'm gonna go through it real quick and then let Matt describe what, these mean. On our vehicle, which we'd actually like to, rearrange things and do this year. Let's pull the new software that he needs. Again, we want to rearrange things and try and do that this year. And then competitive wages for the officers and increase in training budget.
Yeah, so we'll start with Lexipol is a company who reviews policies from across the country. They consolidate those, and then they kind of cater a policy that fits your department with based on the number of officers we have. Type of techniques we use, things that they use in Aurora, obviously, like we don't need a water policy for our department. The real benefit for us, Lexipol, is that they stay on top of months of registration. As soon as they happen, they update our policy on the fly with our change, and us, we review it, make the change. The other nice part of Lexipol is that it's set up so that your officers will receive those updates and they have to sign off that they've read them. That way, we don't have a situation where there was policy change, something happened. No, that's not how it's taught, that's not how it's trained, that's not how we've been doing it. Okay, that may all be true, but you signed a new policy, that's the full, send it to you, we have a digital signature on it, you were updated on those changes. Now we can move forward with that. It's really just kind of a manpower issue, and they just do a much better job compiling that. The legal speak on it. and just covering us from a liability standpoint. It's very difficult to write a policy or even review a policy that's going to cover everything that we need to be worried about right now. They have an army of people who do that for us. Most of the agencies surrounding us have all gone to Alexa whole policy. And I mentioned before, we used to kind of work together. We would share policies, that we all kind of had input on it. Not really an option for us anymore. That's kind of it's where things are going. The other real nice thing about it is it's flexible. If we have something specific that we want to add into our policy, it would say be a municipal code change. We just contact them. And pretty much plain English, we tell them what's going on, what we want to do. They look at our policy and then they figure out where that fits best, what we need to be concerned about, what our possible liability would be, and enforce it, something like that. Not whether or not that any code is effective one or the other, just where we are as law enforcement on that position.
Any questions?
Sorry. So you had talked about this at our last meeting, I believe. It sounded like it was going to be about $17,000 initially. And the hope is that right? Am I?
Yeah, I mean, it's, it looks like I got right here. $14,000 flat rate for department our size implementation fee. That means we will send them what we have for policy. They'll review that. They will tweak that. They will send us the changes they think fit our department, ask us for input, we review those, so on and so forth. That's our implementation fee. After that, it's an annual fee. So this year, our prorated, if this were to start in October, $1,150 would get us through the rest of the year. Effective January, we would pay $4,600, $2.75. That covers us for all of 2020.
Can I just ask for, just to make sure, so we would have to spend $14,000 for the initial, them understanding Paonia and vice versa.
Yes.
And then $1,150 through the end of this year, and then $4,602 the remaining year. So then, of course, my question is, right now, does our public safety budget comfortably have $15,150 available to do that?
It does.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, I went to CERSA's law enforcement thing in Springs, and every agency that was there was using lots of Facebook. CERSA suggests that because it saves legal fees, it also protects you from liability. You can have wayward officers, as we all know. And this way, when an officer does something wayward that he's been trained and signed off on, the city is liable for that. So that's one thing that really helps. You might have seen the stuff that's going on. Meeting that just happened this week where officers were having a guy on the ground and 3 of them were just punching him and kicking him. I mean, that kind of stuff is not their thing. That's a ton more size.
I really missed that. Oh.
Yeah, it was.
It really gives our legal team of CERSA a head start. We have something happen, they come in. Policy. What's it say? What's it look like? So that's a full-based policy. These are the tweaks we have involved, but we're not starting from scratch where we hand them our binder and they look at it. Okay. Start with square one. We're already up and running.
Christine?
Thank you. By virtue of the fact that they are a police officer, aren't they already like checked out that they're not gonna go wayward? Number one. Yeah. Have we had a lot of legal issues with what you're talking about? Police not knowing the law, or?
It's really being pushed to the forefront because of some concern with SB 17, which was a recent legislative change. Departments now are kind of looking at what is our legal liability when our officers act outside of the scope of what we trained them to do. Does it come back on that officer, or if you're starting to see now, does it come back on the department? Where the officer saying, this is how I was shown, this was routine, this was our traditional way of doing it. With Lexipol, it kind of covers that base. No, you sign right here. This is not how you do things. This is not how you were taught. That doesn't work anymore. Whereas before they pull out a policy into, law that I have my car, this is one kind of issue. Yeah, man. It doesn't change. It may be that that town or that department has a new policy, but there's been instances where he's issued that policy, that's when they operate on. Kind of great at this point. Lexipol basically remove that loophole and make sure that as a department, that's still a town, but as a department, it puts it on us to ensure you're getting the updates, you're signing the updates, you're aware of what's going on. That's kind of the big umbrella of it.
And Lexipol does not encourage towns to share this software.
Oh, that's what people.
It's proprietary.
Yeah, it's proprietary.
Said before that they were sharing it.
One of the goals was with those were policies to kind of, it wouldn't necessarily share it, which is work on.
Right.
Okay, right. We'll put together.
Yeah, it would be, yeah, right. The Lexipol is a little different because, what, a department down the road may be using, for example, with the K-9 unit, that's not compliance. So it wouldn't, there would be other people involved with that. It wouldn't go as good as far as that goes, but yeah, it's the information they have.
And just one more quick question, I'm so sorry. Is this gonna prevent us from getting like a victim's advocate, or is there enough in the budget for all those things? Okay, thanks.
So I have.
Dave or Rick, did you have any
I
input?
have something to add. Lexapro could literally save us millions on a lawsuit, and it won't take much of a lawsuit. What we see in Aurora with the fire department and the cop, that's a several $1 million incident. There were 3 cops and 5 firemen there, and the city's paying out millions. And that's what we're trying to avoid. And it was a small incident. Somebody died. And that's where it all comes down to. With Lexapro, we have the policies, and the city is shielded if they go beyond policy. And we also work very hard to make sure that the policy is not a bad policy. That's why we're doing this. It's cheap insurance is what we're trying.
So I have a question about, can we talk about unmarked vehicle? So if we were to get an unmarked vehicle, would we then be selling off some of our current stock cars?
That is technically the plan.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah, we have some vehicles that are, we would consider mileage out. We would not, those vehicles would be moved, but that doesn't really fall under, I'm being told, like public safety necessarily. It's not really my decision. It is to not use those vehicles, but that money doesn't come back into the public safety budget, if I'm correct on that, right?
Well, yes and no.
But yes, that would be the plan. We would not continue to have a fleet. The fleet will not just continue to grow.
Sometimes the vehicles we would request that they be surplus and they'd be auctioned, and other times we transfer. Like some of the trucks that the PD was using at one point were transferred to Public Works.
Before we get away from it, I'd like to ask a couple of questions about Lexipol. If anybody has answers, that'd be great. Since it is basically a liability, it sounds like buffer or like a shield. Does CIRSA have any input on, do they advocate for it? Do they give a bulk discount for us? Do they, is there any, basically, is it valuable to us as far as our policy with them? Will they give us a discount if we purchase this
They
software
didn't come
package?
out and say that, but for a while, they were actually funding small communities. And they might open up another funding cycle, but it's another year now. So we've missed the one for this year, but they believed in it so much, they put money behind it, trying to get communities to adopt Lexipol.
Okay. That was back on the table. I asked about that. My concern was if I pushed for this and then in January, February, We find out that now they're opening up to repay us. I was told there would be, grandfathered in that. It may not be for the entire amount, but if that does get approved, we would be eligible for that since we had purchased it.
Perfect.
Yeah, I have another question on Lexipol. I just want to make sure when Rick gave his example. So if an officer signs off on a policy and then that officer violates that policy and someone's killed, worst case example, are we then, we would not be sued. It would be the officer who would be sued. It would be a civil suit, not the town of Paonia, because he signed off on that, she. I'm just trying to understand the wholesale benefit that we wouldn't get stuck in the Aurora situation if we had it and that officer violated something they clearly signed that they had read.
I think that's probably gonna be situation dependent. And that may be more something for the town's legal counsel. It's not like it's an automatic shield, you know, there may be. It would really be dependent on the situation.
There's really no such thing as an all.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why that's why I wanted to ask, because it's not, of course, but in your opinion, you feel like it offers a lot more protection for the town's risks to
Yeah,
have it than to not have it.
absolutely. And to be clear, I think it's. I want to make sure that my guys know as well, families know, this is not simply for the town, it's also for them. They get the updated policy, they're aware it's changed. They're aware you're no longer chokeholds, we're no longer cuffing up front. There are a lot of things that this benefits them as well. This is not simply for, one side. It's for everybody.
And it can be, so the Senate bill added who could be sued. It didn't reduce who, it didn't take people out, it added people in. But Lexipol also can be reduced down. Not only will they have those documents and they'll have them on their computer, but it can be reduced down to an app where they have it active at their fingertips in their vehicles. If they have a question about a policy and they want to look, this isn't only in intense situations, it's every day. Any day that they need a refresher to look something up or anything, got it at their fingertips.
Thanks.
Do you want to ask something?
I just wanted to kind of echo or say what Matt said before he said it. I think the important part to focus on here is not necessarily the benefits of the town finances, but if there's a possibility that there's an interaction with the police and a town's, anybody, any of us, and it goes better and people are safer because we have better information going to our officers. I think it makes a lot of sense.
All right. All right, anything else? Yeah, let's do wages. Yeah.
Since you were on the vehicle before.
Oh, sure.
I just gotta say that personally, I am not in favor of having an unmarked vehicle for our police force. I feel like we're a small town and I like to wave to you guys when you go by. Hope you don't mind waving to everybody all day long as you drive around. And I think that it just is a matter of crime prevention. I don't really know much criminology, but my understanding is that one of the greatest deterrents to crime is just the presence and realization that police are around. So unmarked car, I think, defeats that presence. So I understand the need for new vehicles periodically, but if there's any way that we can make sure that our vehicles remain visibly police vehicles, I would be much more in favor of that.
Can you give us a rationale for the unmarked?
Yeah, so the purpose of the marked car. For the unmarked car, is really, that's a strict enforcement role. And almost more of a liability role, we would use for multiple things. The unmarked cars we use to travel to trains, so we're not driving a marked car everywhere. Per policy and per most policies, if you're in a marked vehicle, you are to be wearing your equipment, you are to be wearing your vest, you are to have your radio on. If we send somebody to Greeley for a training in a marked car, we are requiring them to suit up in their uniform, travel. Every day when they get up to drive to that training, they are to do the same. Even if they get to that training and they're required to take it all off for defensive tactics or it's a classroom or leadership academy, where it wouldn't be appropriate, we would be dressed like this. The other reason is that unmarked car would not be fully outfitted in the sense of a cage. We would not be using it to transport people. It would be used for transport officers to team events or teams training. So we're not driving 4 vehicles down for everybody qualified for range, or 4 vehicles down for training with Mason County Sheriff's Office. We can put everybody in one vehicle, comfortably travel down there, travel back. It also limits our exposure outside of the town of just having marked cars everywhere outside of town boundaries. Those are kind of just before, as far as an enforcement standpoint, that wouldn't necessarily be the focus, but it wouldn't be fair to me to say that we wouldn't use it at all for that. We would probably use that for some targeted enforcement. Illegal turns on Grant. If we're parked there in the park patrol car, we don't see them. If we walk down there down the sidewalk, we'll see a few of them. If we're in an unmarked car, not that that's something we would focus on every day, but that is a citizen complaint that I get very, very frequently. It makes it much easier to address that if we have the equipment for that. But we will not be using that vehicle for control. That's not. It really wouldn't be ideal. I don't like this, not to set up that box, I'm not application it. That's not the role for that vehicle. Sure, clarification.
Okay, so,
I just had a question. So with regard to Lexipol, I know we cannot make any motions tonight, but it sounds like at some point the trustees need to make a motion as to whether we approve the expenditure, because I think I don't know how it jives with our purchasing policy, but I'm just throwing that out there. We need to make a decision at some point.
I believe it's on the September 8th agenda.
Oh, it is? Okay, good, thanks.
all right, so let's come to wages.
That's a great question. Aren't there 2 already unmarked, like white sedan sort of vehicles?
We have one unmarked car. It's a 2002 Ford Explorer, 107,000 on it. And it's not actually set up as an unmarked vehicle per state guidelines. We have a single light in it that operates through cigarette lighter and is attached to the light. So we don't use it for traffic enforcement. We don't use it. There's no cage in it. We don't really use it for any of those things. That's the only one we have. It's unmarked.
And would you need all that cage and everything if you're going to like workshops or?
No, the cage will not be in the back of.
Yeah, okay.
Not the cage, but we would need. There are some things that we have to notify the state of for emergency vehicle. So the lighting, those things, there are some specs we do have to follow on those. That vehicle does not meet those. We're not using it for that role. An unmarked car, we would follow those guidelines for our lighting purpose. Basically have a bit of added touch, so it would be used for emergency operations, but not for critical.
And that vehicle is not in reliable condition for it to be able to travel any distance outside of the property.
all right, now can we go on to competitive wages? So what is the average wage in the state of Colorado for a town person?
For a regular patrol officer.
Yeah.
It's really gonna be tough. It's all over, it'd be fairly high for an hourly rate. Grand Junction, I believe, is starting officers around $33 an hour.
How many? 33?
We are in a situation right now across the state where there is not enough police officers. And so everybody is competing for a limited resource. These officers are going to different departments.
You can give them our finance.
We had an officer put in his notice today. He will be headed to a different department. That is mostly going to be salaried. We're simply not competitive, and that is another local department. It's not like it's something outside of our realm. The other example is Montrose is offering, for example, a sign-on bonus for officers, 2 years plus experience, I believe they're offering $10,000. It's almost 25% of one of our officers. And it's getting very difficult to bring people here, to keep them here, and to spend their resources on training them, equipping them, integrating them into the community, meeting people, getting them into schools, and then watching them walk out.
I might add that we're one of the most expensive communities to live in the entire area. So that's where we're having a problem. And one of the possible future things is that we have employee housing for city employees. And we're talking some real money there, like $6 or $7 million. Yeah, an apartment building. Or whatever.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that when on August 4th, I believe, you sent us the CML salary survey, and there was a separate spreadsheet that was for public safety, if I remember correctly. So would you suggest that we all revisit that and be prepared to look at that and talk about that when we get deeper into salary?
Not necessarily, we'll provide the information at the time of digging deeper into this.
But
Public safety.
Hey, let me interrupt for a second. If I could. There's two pieces of information that are really missing. One, the actual salary range for me is not included, and the actual salaries for Hotchkiss were not included. But when I look at the salary ranges for Delta County, we were the lowest. So the lowest paid for officers, the highest cost of living. It just doesn't match. You kind of, one of the concerns I've always seen in HR is that when you have that kind of situation, what you end up being is a training ground for all the other officers, for all the other departments around the county. They can easily move to any of these other places, make more money. So you end up with a department that rather than trying to be proactive, what you end up doing is just constantly churning through people and training them. You're spending most of your administrative time trying to train people, and send people. So the costs are immense.
And that's historically what Paoli has done. Absolutely.
with that in mind, can you, Cindy, can you give us what we have received to date from a 0.8% increase for back to badge? So we know, because that is an extra tax that we are getting. I forget how much of the whole thing, but it's relatively substantial, which would help us with our budgeting. And I don't know that I know exactly how much has come from 0.8% in terms of our revenue. But to me, this is the first year we got that.
Oh, no.
No, it was just voted in last January, last November. So this, I think, is the first year we've gotten that extra 0.8%. So we do kind of have an idea what that can help us with our budget.
That 0.8% is for the county. They allocate
Right.
that.
Right, and that's what I'm saying. How much did Paonia get?
We started receiving back the badge funds in March of 21. It totaled 184,000. Anybody listen?
Yes, go ahead, sorry. How much?
184,000.
Okay.
So far to date. Through what we received in January, these are numbers as we received them, not this is not the months that they happen in. So this year to date, we have received 157.4.
And that money, as I understand it, they asked us not to reduce our budget, our own budget, and use this money as extra. Keep our budget as stable as we can, but this becomes extra. So perhaps extra can be used for salary increases.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
if you all are in agreement for me to work in that direction.
And then would you speak on the training budget? Yeah.
Yeah, so the training budget, it kind of follows what we just spoke about with officers. As people come on, we need to send them to the appropriate trainings. To kind of fit what this department's after and what our direction is. That's part of it. The other part of it is the training has been required. We're required by the state to provide X amount of hours of training each officer every year. some of those trainings require instructors, so, you know, a driving instructor, an arrest and control instructor, and a firearms instructor. If we don't have those instructors on staff, we have to farm that out or send our guys somewhere else to receive that training. Once we receive our requisite number of hours the state requires, that's kind of the end of our training in that subject matter, if we don't have somebody on staff to keep up with that. Now, if we have somebody on staff to keep up with that, then we can continue to train throughout the year on those things. The three big ones that the state's identified, driving, shooting, arrest control. Those ones we have to stay on top of. That's a part of this. The other part of this is really addressing where we would like to go as a department of law enforcement with some of our mental health stuff, some of our crisis intervention team stuff, working with a few other departments and their mental health experts. We really need to start training our guys that instead of simply using those words, we talk to them. Hey, we need to be more open or more understanding. Really need statements to make to somebody, but it doesn't necessarily work when we're face to face with them in the dark. We need to increase that training so our officers understand what it is we're asking them to do and the best way to help those people and to keep our officers out of situations that create liability. So we're not going hands-on or being physical with somebody that we're having trouble communicating with because they may be deaf. But they are gesturing crazily and we're not trained for that. And all of a sudden we have some ground in hands. This is that increased training budget. You can watch some of these training videos online, which we're encouraging our guys to do and they are doing, but it's different when you get to go hands-on with people who have been in these fields, people who are experienced in these areas and have dealt with this. That's the type of hands-on training our guys need and they'll benefit from. The other little leg of this is that training has gotten more expensive. We have to travel farther, fuel's more expensive, rooms more expensive, and so that's where this increased training budget comes in. It's unfortunate when you find training that you need to send somebody to and it's totally fitting in the budget, but it doesn't fit. Most of the people putting on trainings have been really good with us when we explain we're rural, we're small. This is kind of our one shot. I need to get somebody into this training. They work with us, but we need to make sure we have funds to move ahead with that. Always kind of the program where they will reimburse some of those training costs. But if we enter the year strictly relying on all of that cost to be reimbursed, I'm not sure that's the best way to go about it. We're just budgeting for it, spending it, and we submit our reimbursement.
Yeah, I kind of feel like we were just touching on the subject of being a training place for people who show up and receive training and leave. So just as a matter of order, I suppose, it makes sense to me to make sure that we have good retention, we reduce our turnover, and we know that we have a good solid team, and then begin a more in-depth training program at that time so that we can avoid this problem.
That's one. I mean, it doesn't help us to bring somebody on for 3 months, send them to a very coveted training and have them walk out the door. That doesn't help our department. But we have people on staff who have been here, who do have some training. We can also use this as a recruitment and retention tool. It's what a lot of departments do. What are you interested in? Why would I like to drive? You come for us. The other thing we've been utilizing is a kind of training contract. So you want to go to this training, you sign a contract. If you successfully complete the training, we're going to cover the cost and you will work for the town for 24 or 36 months. If you leave before then, you owe us that training cost. But it also allows us kind of to offer something else to a lot of cadets who, while bigger departments may be offering more money, if you go to a big department, the chance of you becoming a driving firearms instructor pretty slim to start with because they probably have enough of those people on staff.
There's been a lot of articles in the last week about Denver's STAR program. And it's a really different approach. Like Seattle's had so many problems, Portland's had so many problems with the defunding of the police. What Denver did is they didn't defund the police, they created a STAR program. So I don't know what STAR stands for, but essentially, when they get a 911 call and it's a homeless person or a person in crisis or a domestic dispute, they don't send the police in. They send an EMT, they send a mental health counselor, and that's where they start. And they have data on that program now showing a reduction in crime and a reduction in violence. There's a lot of benefits to that program. So I think overall it's worthwhile for the public and just trustees and all of us to kind of look at that philosophy, because Denver's really been a showpiece for it.
And we did try, back when Neil was chief, we had an agreement with Center for Mental Health in Montrose, and they had a crisis response team. And if we got in a situation like that, the police could call the crisis response team, and the police would be there as backup, but the crisis response team was the one that actually responded to the issue. And I believe that kind of fell apart.
This is actually in the works. We've reached out to Delta PD. They have agreed to bring up their mental health correspondent. He's going to meet with us. We're going to kind of talk about what it is they do, what we expect, kind of what we need. What's involved with that program, but that hasn't started back. We are working through that. And that program, feedback I'm getting from the officers on the front line, but that program is very, very good. It's working very well.
All right, any other questions? I know, it's blocking the window. Just a couple of things. Yeah.
To say two things. Is there anything in the budget for like animal?
Not yet.
Okay, there's a lot of benefits.
Yeah,
Street dogs.
we have nowhere to take them. Read back to the material we had previously. Encourage have a facility, but it's kind of outside of the realm for us to load up the animals, transport them to Cedar Ridge, the shelter, come back. There was some discussion about if nobody shows up, do we put the bill on that now? That's a very complex issue, and I'm not sure what the best solution to that is. I mean, obviously, if we had a shelter here, it would be fantastic.
Just an opportunity for somebody outside of town that has some property to build one, and
Yeah.
they'd have an income instantly.
There it is.
And we have tried to contract kennels to do that, and they won't do it. So,
No, it's too much liability for.
right, exactly. And then there's the whole access issue. You have a dog at 2 a.m. What are you going to do with it? I mean, you have to access the area where you keep the dog. And so the kennel's liability insurance.
And one other thing, is that, I think down further, there's something about that electric vehicle perhaps, but I would love to see like a couple offices, on bikes, electric bikes. Because to really, to really get to know the community, people can stop them, talk, and then we get to know who's working.
Yeah.
And we have a relationship with them.
This, I've actually looked into this, particularly with this new transport e-bikes. It's definitely an option. Lexipol has some portions on it. There are some liability trainings we would have to make sure our guys attended to do that. But particularly for like Grand Avenue, very efficient.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right, so it is 6:04. If we're going to have any kind of break, we've been at this an hour and have managed to get through 3 on the first page and not even anything else. What I would suggest is that one of two tasks, either we pick out 1 or 2 things that we're interested in by and large and get that addressed in more depth, or we just do the quick and dirty, let's go over list. Let's get a general overview of this. And then as we get into the parks budget, we can go into these things in more detail instead of trying to go into these things in more detail right now. where we're not gonna make a decision on. You know, Lexapol will be on the next agenda items or on the next meeting. So let's, if you're willing, let's try and do a broader overview.
So I'm just gonna build a budget with all these items in it. And then we can just pick it apart and, pick out the things that work and the things that don't work. One quickly, did anybody look at the staffing levels for each area? Any questions or comments on staffing level?
This is why I really like that you did the charts where you just look at it, and if it's one color, that's a new position, that's a yellow. If it's if it's that shaded color, then that means there's been some kind of a promotion or a change in job duties. If it's white, that's the position that you're there for. So one of the things I think all of us want to be cautious about is we don't want to tie the hands of, like, we're recruiting for town administrator right now. So how much leeway do we want to allow for that person to come in more of her staffing levels in different departments? So, you know, I think it's really helpful to be looking at the charts the way you put them. It kind of gives us that overview. And it's a lot easier than the way we did way through before. I think all of us were kind of frustrated with it. So thanks.
Okay, any other general areas you guys want to look at this evening? Thomas?
And I suppose it's capital. I'm not sure it's not like some of those other projects, finding capital as well. Maybe I don't understand.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's Cindy, why don't you explain the whole capital?
What's the distinction?
So the first page that we've been going over is just the projects in each department by department. Then capital is its own item, though that is where we do capital improvement from. So that'll be building repairs, larger items, vehicles, and that kind of thing come out of capital. That's general fund. Both those pages are general fund. Fund. Then you have the water and sewer and trash, and that is enterprise. Those cannot come out of capital, and those all have to be funded by their department.
I guess my confusion is the distinction between the first page or whatever, page 10 in the packet, page 11 in the packet. I see unmarked vehicle, right, in public safety on page 10, and on page 11, I see vehicle replacement. Is that the same thing?
One's an unmarked vehicle, the other one is, so we have 3 vehicles that are extremely old and have very high mile and have repair issues. That would be the one.
2004 Crown Vic and the older marked Ford.
Which we got that from Delta PD. And it's way high miles. So, and we have talked in the past that we need to upgrade the vehicles on a regular basis. So the one that's coming from the department is unmarked. The one that is coming out of capital would be marked.
Right, so I guess that's my question, is the distinction between those 2 projects. How is it? Why is one capital and one, I mean, just like the source of funds?
First fund.
Okay. Right. Well, in that case, I feel like there's a bunch of stuff under the capital projects that seems unnecessary.
So before we start cutting, just so you know that this is, again, just not all of these things we ever anticipate would be things that could be done in 2022, but it's starting to look, or 23, sorry, it's starting to look beyond just 1 year and bringing to the board's awareness things that we are seeing that we're going to need to start thinking about. So simple as, again, we have that conversation about converting the kitchen to a boardroom, because it can't be used as a kitchen. We wouldn't want to convert it back to commercial kitchen anyway. And it would have to be a commercial kitchen by town or people renting. But there's also the conversation about the fact in public safety that our police department is inefficient in size. So would we potentially have a remodel done that brought in some of the that kitchen and office to extend the peak, things like that. Not necessarily all things that would be happening in 2023, but just things that the board, we want to start making the board aware
Well, that makes some sense, I suppose. In that, I mean, I guess this is the appropriate place to bring them to our attention, but it seems like a lot of the stuff is we're giving up. I mean, from the general fund, that's streets and sidewalks, you know? So it seems like we're giving up stuff that is really like our fundamental basic reason for being here, for enhancements or changes to the space or some of the equipment that we have or would like to have, say, when we're not even really fulfilling the most fundamental reasons that we're here yet. So at this time, I'm not really comfortable supporting any of these capital projects. Unless it's specifically to enable like the mower, you know, if we got a broken mower, I forget, we bought one not too long ago. Travis broke up that deal as I recall, but I mean, obviously there's things that like have to be there to do the job versus things that are nice to haves. And I see a lot of nice to haves here.
So I don't disagree, and I'm just, again, it's also thinking down the line. Some of these things, they require budgeting, so, and planning. And so do we look at this and go, okay, you know what, we know we're outgrowing our police department. Can we throw a lot of money at remodeling the police department in 23? No, but we can start putting money in reserves toward it, like we did with the trash truck. It's things like that. It's bigger than saying, this is a priority over the street or priority over sidewalk. It absolutely isn't, but it's something that is going to happen. Just like we're talking about our customers, our community members, people that come into town hall. We have people with certain abilities, different abilities that make it impossible for them to come to the front counter and pay their utility bill. So those are things we would want to consider and look at. So I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. It just really is to start thinking about, okay, well, these are things that are coming down the line as well. And how are we going to start planning and budgeting in the future?
I've seen a lot more improvements, I think, to this room than I've seen to the sidewalks in this town in the past 4 years or so. So I just want to make sure that our priorities are aligned with the priorities of the people we're supposed to represent.
Okay. So what changes and additions do you want to add in here? Since you're one of them that didn't schedule to meet, I mean, what do you want added on?
Okay. Well, regarding my understanding is that you got the email from Jeremiah, which outlined most of his thoughts, and that's the water sewer trash outline. I think that's his wish list is
Water and
spot on.
water and sewer.
Okay, water sewer. Thank you. But regarding this specific list, page 11, carpet, kitchen conversion to boardroom, additional storage area, relocation of secondary interior door, the upstairs open space, vehicle replacement. I think we should watch that very closely. We've been buying a lot of vehicles in the past several years. All electric UTV. We already bought one about 2 or 3 years ago, or bought an electric vehicle, which is completely unused as far as I know. A reconfiguration or relocation of the police department. I think that if our town is the same size, our police department should be about the same size. I think that we should focus on having high quality and consistent people here instead of trying to accommodate more people. For public works, I think that basically it'd be great to have a checklist from you guys as to like what's actually broken, you know, what's missing, and what would be like, you know, cherry on top. And I'm seeing stuff here that seems like if it's not there, yeah, we need it, you know. If we don't have a mower, let's buy one. If we have a mower that's working, and it'd be cool to have one that's faster, you know. Like, let's get ready for that. That's the kind of planning I think that Karen's talking about.
I do want to clarify on the police department. We're not trying to make more room for more people.
Okay.
There's issues in our police department, such, again, we have ADA issues. There's not one space in the police department other than the chief's office that someone can come into the PD that's in a wheelchair or some type of motorized device. We have no interview room in our police department, so if you're interviewing, say, and I'm not, I'm.
Yeah, all I have to read is reconfigure, relocate, please.
Right.
That's it.
Right, because it's just preliminary, but so I'm just saying, since we're discussing things we want to be taking off, this isn't. I'm specifically responding to, this is not to add more people. It's to serve the community. If you have a domestic violence victim, you don't want to be walking the perpetrator in the same area as the victim, things like that. It's just, when the building was built in the 80s and the police department was put back there, those were things that just weren't considered. And so when we're talking about reconfiguration, that's the kind of things we're trying to consider.
Yeah, and I don't want to step on your toes to please continue, but this is a perfect segue into, can we please get trustees a tour of this building?
Yes.
And to me, because I don't have any idea what you're referring to, and if I can see it, it's going to help make the point.
Right.
So
It's
if
on
we
the
could,
list of the things
yeah, I know, but it's just help, it's just one of those things that I've never been beyond the kitchen.
Well, and that's the other thing is that any of us at any time can basically come in here and say, can we look around?
Right, but I would kind of like it to be under the auspices of that resolution of orientation, just so you're not,
Right.
and I'd like to have somebody show me around and not walk around. So Mary, I understand that, but I don't want to intrude like that. Anyway, thank you.
All right. All right. So we now have 14 minutes till the official meeting. I think we should take a little break here and then come back and get the meeting started. All right, work session is adjourned.